So, the back end of last year, the budget's announced there were some changes coming into R&D tax legislation with to try and tackle fraud and to improve compliance and to try and improve the quality and compliance of R&D tax claims going through. And so with that, there's been some changes to the tax relief you're going to get from R&D tax claims, but also in the reporting requirements on how you submit reports, on the information you need to provide, and the way that's all been managed. And so with all these changes and with the advice that we've been giving clients, so I thought it'd be a good time for us to get together. Now we've spoken to our clients and now we are giving advice to just fire some questions between the two of us. What do you think?
Okay, so if you've not submitted a claim previously, or if you've not claimed in the previous 3 years, you need to notify HMRC of your intent to make a claim, and within that you need to tell them the company name, UTR, who the R&D agent is, and what field of technology it falls under.
When do they need to notify them?
So you need to notify HMRC within 6 months of the company year end.
So you talked about when they need to submit it, if they haven't submitted the claim before, but what do they need to report on?
So in terms of the technical side of things, the company needs to be looking at, again, the 3 main criteria as before: what the advance in technology is, what the technological uncertainties were to demonstrate that the work wasn't readily deducible by a competent professional, how those uncertainties were come, what methodologies were used, etc. There's now the need to report on what field of science or technology the project falls into and what sort of level of baseline you've measured that against. But what do you think, what other sort of questions do you think companies would need to be looking at? What other research would they need to be looking at in order to prepare for these claim changes?
I think it revolves around establishing that baseline. What the company needs to be doing is they need to be going out and understanding what is in the public domain. So the competent professionals within the company need to be understanding what information has been published, what is in the public domain, engaging with the competent professionals to understand what the state of knowledge is within the industry. And what that does, it sets that baseline within the project, and also it qualifies the advance and also quantifies the advance, which then can feed into the technical reporting.
So other than the addition of cloud computing and data licenses, the qualifying expenditure, which can be claimable under R&D relief, remains the same. So staff involvement, consumables, data licenses, cloud computing, subcontractors and EPWs.
So with those changes in the costs, you mentioned subcontracting, are there any changes coming into practice this year?
Not this year, but from April 2024, non-UK subcontractors and non-UK external provided workers won't be eligible for R&D relief. How do you think this would impact different business types, different companies?
So I think the non-UK based subcontractors, it's going to really hit the software companies because not all, but a lot of software companies are using non-UK based software agencies to produce pieces of code or produce pieces of programming for them. And so these companies are really going to have to just completely change their business model and bring all that resource back into the UK, and that could potentially have a huge impact on profitability on projects. So we've talked about the prescriptive parts and some of the non-prescriptive parts of technical reporting. How many projects do they need to report on?
So it depends how many projects are undertaken by the company. So if there are 3 projects undertaken by the company during the year, then the company would need to report on all of the projects, detail all of the projects within the claim. If a company has undertaken 4 to 10 projects during the year, the company needs to report on at least the three biggest projects, and ensure that they cover 50% of the qualifying costs. If a company has undertaken more than 10 projects during the year, again, the company needs to be reporting on at least 3 of the projects, and again, covering 50% of the qualifying expenditure.
We talked about the high level points on the actual technical reporting, you know what the project is, how it's overcome the advances, and some outside of that. What kind of things the company needs to be doing, engaging with the professionals, understanding what's in the public domain to allow them to really qualify what they're doing as R&D. So what do you think would be good practice for these companies to put in place now?
So it'd be good practice to start putting in place now things like timesheets, project deliverables, things like detailing the projects as they go along, project-specific consumables, project-specific subcontractors, sort of recording the types of research undertaken at technical feasibility studies, keeping notes of things like that.
So I think taking everything into account, so changes in corporation tax rate, change in reporting requirements, how those are submitted, in some cases the question they're asking, and some of the points which we've raised today, talking things broader than those baseline questions. I think companies really need to start looking at R&D as if you are building a project proposal almost. Putting those planning activities in place, putting that project planning in place, putting those budgets in place. Because if you have a budget at the start of your project, it's going to be a lot easier to make sure you're allocating the correct costs at the end. But I think this is going to have a huge impact on a lot of businesses, because a lot of businesses aren't inherently R&D intensive, or R&D isn't part of their day-to-day. The technical uncertainties and the R&D comes out of the work they're doing. They don't start at the start of financial year and go, right, okay, here's my R&D budget. So a lot of them do, but they go, here's my R&D project. Here's my budget. We're going to do this, that, and the other. They work throughout the year and the projects they're doing, and it's evolving. But I think that companies need to take a step back and realise that they need to be looking at, I said, a bit more proactively rather than retrospectively. Get the budget in place, get your project plans in place, understand who's working on it, making sure you've got consumer budgets, subcontracting budgets, because it will help you no end when it comes to doing your corporation tax return and doing your R&D claim, because that information will already be there.